Hi everyone, please welcome with me Will Duncan from the US. Has had many experiences with traveling the world and he has been to a lot of interesting places, but one particularly caught my eye and I wanted to talk a little bit more about it as well, and that's his experience in going to Uganda and working with children at an orphanage, which I find particularly interesting, which also inspired him to write a book that's called Specks of Dust, which we will also talk a little bit about. But for now, thank you so much, Will, for making some time to talk to us today and to share your story. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
It is really interesting. We have talked a little bit already, and you have told me a little bit also where you have been already. But to start from right from the beginning, how did traveling enter your life? How did it even make an appearance?
Oh yeah. I'm pretty lucky, and my family always prioritized travel as a thing. I think part of it goes back to even my father because his father, my grandfather, was a Navy chaplain. And so my dad grew up living in Japan, living in Iceland. And so I think it was pretty ingrained in us, in him from an early age. And so then it became ingrained in us as a family, and we would go on these family trips. I remember when I was in seventh grade, we took a trip to the Galapagos Islands. And that was one of
Very
those
cool.
experiences that happened, right, turning what, 12, 13. It just influences you immensely. And then you just want to get more and more.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Like experiences you have when you're younger, and especially when they were positive, makes a difference. And the Galapagos Islands, that's such a great destination as well, where you can see so much differences, which I find always very interesting. I don't need to go to another country which looks exactly like my own. I love seeing the differences and the different plants and animals and architecture. So, how would you think that the experiences you had with your parents were changing the view you had with the world or of the world, but also changed the view about yourself?
That's a great question. There's a phenomenal quote that I will absolutely butcher by Mark Twain that says, travel is fatal to bigotry and small mindedness, basically, is the gist of it. And I think that's really true. And having grown up in a pretty small town that is pretty closed off, most people who I grew up with never left the state of North Carolina. They didn't really value travel. And by getting this wider perspective, I think it not only made me more willing to be empathetic towards other groups, other people, other ideas, um, but it also allowed me to think of myself as someone who could adapt a little bit more and to see the value in being placed in uncomfortable situations. When you grow up as privileged as I am, you sometimes start to feel a kind of responsibility to make the most of it, to not waste that privilege, and to not put yourself in a bubble because it's so easy to do. And by traveling, I think it helps burst that bubble and make you see things that you don't necessarily have to experience to try and understand.
Yeah. And you already brought up the word compassion, or was it empathy?
Empathy.
Um,
But yeah,
but it kind of goes hand in hand, right? And
absolutely.
would you think it helped you also to have some more empathy or compassion with yourself when you went and saw the world and traveled also by yourself.
Absolutely. But it's funny because I think empathy is also a double edged sword. It makes me think about how I've heard that people who were once homeless, who work at homeless shelters, tend to be actually less empathetic towards the people they serve because they say, I got out of this. I don't know why you're struggling so much. And so sometimes your empathy can be like, I know what it's like to have these difficult situations, and you can be more forgiving towards yourself. Or you can say, other people have had it so much tougher than me. Why am I being a whiny little boy? So it really, what it comes down to, I think, is mindset and having the right
Yeah.
positive mindset and asking yourself, how can I use my experiences to make myself and the world a better place?
Yeah. But that's already really good too, to be aware of those different mindsets. And you are pretty much the person who chooses how you want to see the world, right? And for me, for example, I usually choose to be more empathetic towards other people when I see that they are struggling and I have been in the same situation. So I would make a move to get to know someone or to say hi first if they are alone, because I know it's hard to be by
Mhm.
yourself. But of course, there could be other people that, as you said, say, I have been in this situation. We all had to go through that at one point. They should be more open. They should do this. They should do that. So it really depends on how you kind of deal with it and how you want to react to people. So thank you for both views pretty much. Which one would you think have or comes to play for yourself?
I think it's a case by case basis. To build on that, it makes me think of something else, which is how decision making happens. You know, you talked about how you see someone alone, and then your empathy gets drawn out by that because you understand what it's like to be in that situation. Sometimes I experience paralysis, choice paralysis, because I see someone in a situation and I wonder, depending on the circumstance, because in some places, so for example, I was in Cambodia and I saw a man and his wife fighting in the street, and it was incredibly uncomfortable. And part of me wanted to stop that, to intervene, but at the same time, everyone else around me, and you know, it's a cultural norm in Cambodia. You're not supposed to do anything that draws attention to yourself, and by intervening, you're kind of intruding your own cultural mores on them. So instead, I just sat there really uncomfortable for a good 10 minutes while this happened, until finally something happened and the scene ended. So it's one of those things, you just kind of have to, through experience, I suppose, play it by ear.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. You mentioned Cambodia. Where else have you been already before we come to your Uganda experience? Because I know you have had quite big travels and like all over the world, countries that are not necessarily next to each other. So you kind of have been everywhere and still not everywhere at the same time because the world is just so big.
That's the truth. There are so many options in the world, and they just continue to expand the more you visit. Uh,
Yeah.
that said, I've been to a great number, for my age. Um, I probably won't list them all. I do keep a spreadsheet because I just love organization and lists and things like that. But
Yeah.
some of the highlights, I would say, I did spend a year in Cambodia. I've studied abroad and worked abroad in London in the UK and have backpacked there. I've spent some time in the former Yugoslavia region, uh, Switzerland and Iceland, Chile and Peru and Argentina, Mexico and Canada. I've been to 49 of the 50 states in the United States. I have been to India and spent a month there. I've been to Samoa on my way here to New Zealand. I've been to Japan, and I've also spent 3 weeks in China and various places across Europe as well.
Yeah, that is definitely a big number of countries that you have visited, and also some of them quite unusual destinations. What brought you to Yugoslavia, for example?
That was also a study abroad opportunity. So I went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and between my freshman and sophomore year, the Honors College had two options for honors travel, study abroad over the summer. And one was Rwanda, and the other one was the former Yugoslavia. And it was studying the effects of nationalism and the role of international organizations in conflict resolution. And I had done Model United Nations, and I think mostly I just wanted to see as many places as possible. So the fact that you got to go to Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, uh, we went into Macedonia and Croatia, and you spend also some time in Vienna. And so lots of places. And so, of
Yeah,
course, I said, "Oh, yeah,
yeah,
I'll do that. That sounds phenomenal."
yeah. That sounds really cool. Was it all one study course that you could choose, and then they would offer so many opportunities to go overseas?
I'm sorry, I don't fully follow the question.
Okay, so for me, I haven't been studying, so I don't really know how it works to get opportunities from uni to
Mm.
actually go abroad. Like, I know that certain people have the opportunities dependent on the classes or courses they take as well. Like, I have a friend who is doing architecture, and of course, architecture, there's so much in different countries that she often gets the opportunity to choose a different country to study and see something new. While, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you studied also IT? Is that correct? Not quite,
I
hey?
I'm yeah, I actually I did a coding boot camp after university when I turned 26 and had to get off of my parents' health insurance. I had to make a decision on what to actually do with my
Right,
life. But at university, I majored in economics and minored in Chinese and art history. So a really
right.
kind of bizarre combination of things, fairly eclectic. With these study abroad programs, they're open to anyone who has a certain level of a GPA, which is why they're considered honors courses. And basically, they are led by a professor who has a certain program. And when you take the course, you travel with this single professor, and they have these discussions, and you travel with him through these or her through these various places. And then by the end of it, you take an exam or something like that, and then you get your credits for whatever things subjects are talked about. So I think with that one
Yeah.
I earned political science credits. Not that I think I necessarily needed them, but
Yeah. I mean, now since you mentioned what your course is, it absolutely makes sense for you to go abroad and be just everywhere, especially with your major. Like, it sounds crazy, but also very interesting. So, yeah, for sure. It makes sense to then see different countries and cultures. And also, when you say in Chinese and history, and it definitely makes sense. How did your opportunity with Uganda came about? Was that also through the uni?
It was also through the university, but it was slightly different. It wasn't led by any kind of professor. Instead, there was a university program uh, called a gradu. I don't remember what it stands for. But basically, over the summer, I always tried to find something to do over each summer that involved travel.
Yeah.
And basically, what they would do is if you wanted to volunteer, they would team you up with different nonprofits in specifically Uganda that needed that skill set. And so at the time, really wanted to work in the nonprofit world. And I thought it would be a great opportunity for me to start to understand finances since I was an economics major and to do some financial work while traveling. So I said, "Oh, this is perfect." And it's a continent I had never touched, never been to, uh, and I'm always looking for something completely different, something that I can learn from. So when I heard about the opportunity, it just kind of fell into my lap. I applied for a grant that gave me, thankfully, some money to make it happen. And
Yeah.
then with I think about four other volunteers. We traveled to Uganda, and one volunteer was paired with myself in Uganda, based in Kampala. And then two others were sent to a different city, working with a different group.
Right. Very interesting. And was Africa ever on your kind of mental list of countries you wanted to experience?
I mean, everywhere is technically on the list. Was Uganda in particular high on the list? No, I wouldn't have said that. Um, but when an opportunity comes, you gotta take it.
Yes. It kind of was meant to happen that you were there at that time. And was it always planned to be at the orphanage? I assume because it was a non-profit, they do a lot of help with orphanages and other places where especially children are in need. How did that work? Did you stay directly at the orphanage or did you have a different accommodation?
That's a great question. I was based in the town outside of Kampala called Bulanga, and the orphanage was a 5-minute walk away. And we were housed in a volunteer house, basically. So this orphanage has other volunteers who come. We aren't the only ones who have a partnership with. Instead, they've had other people come. And so I think they had this volunteer quarters specifically set up for those kinds of people. You know, it had admittedly much better living situations than you would find uh, at the orphanage itself. And they also had specifically a housekeeper who would come and cook us dinner each night.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about how your day looked like while you were there? So, from the morning till you got back and got your dinner at the volunteer house.
Yeah, it's almost tough to explain because I was there for 2 months and every day was significantly different. But I will try to do as much justice as I can.
Thanks.
I would wake up in the morning, probably, I imagine fairly early, probably like 7 in the morning. And then on the way out, we would stop at a little stall along the way. And my personal favorite thing to have was a Rolex, which is a chapati, which is the Ugandan kind of bread. It's pretty squishy. And they would have an omelet basically, which cracked egg with some cabbage, some salt, some slices of tomato. You wrap it up and you eat it. It was delicious. I still miss that meal. And they would hand it to you in some old, newspaper or something like that.
Yeah.
So after that, you would walk along the street a little bit more, go down to the orphanage, and I would probably, let's say, the other volunteer who was with me, Sasha, she would probably start teaching some children, probably the youngest group, with a blackboard that was broken and tilted, and the kids would just be off and out and about. Very difficult for her to kind of wrangle them up. And the teachers would sometimes not even be there. And then I would probably be focused on trying to talk to the person in charge of the finances and ask him, how much do you spend on the food? You know, because they would be, say, getting ready to send certain kids off to school because the new term started. But actually, the new term started 2 weeks ago, and we got some kids out, but the rest of the kids haven't gotten to school yet because they're missing shoes. They are missing school books. And so now we have to go on a trip in the middle of the day into Kampala to try and get some of these things. And so as we're there, I'm asking, okay, how much did we spend on that? How much did we spend on this? Because they didn't have a budget. They had no idea how much money they spent on anything. And then once we finished that, oh, well, actually, there is a kid who we can't send back to school because they got malaria. So now we have to, at the same time, go and stop by the doctor to get the malaria pills for this kid. And then we'll get a call from another school that said, oh, Francis, he broke his arm climbing up a mango tree. So now we have to go fetch Francis from out at the place where he's at and bring him back. And to find out, oh, that broken arm actually happened 2 weeks ago and nothing's been done about it, and now it's starting to heal wrong, so now we have to immediately take him to the hospital to see how much that's going to cost. Once all those things are taken care of, or at least kind of initiated at the very least, because all these things take time, you come back half exhausted, uh, have a meal of probably some sliced avocado. Um, One of the common things was something they called matoke, which are plantains, and a G nut sauce, which is made of peanuts. But it's pretty purple, fairly tasty though, and that would be our meal for dinner.
Yeah. That makes sense then when you say a day was fairly different each day. Like, um, sometimes I have in my mind, it's one place and days can look quite say the same every day. But yeah, I can imagine like it sounds quite chaotic. And also if like was your main task kind of to look after the finances and to help them with this type of topic as well, while your other colleague was more looking after children, teaching, helping out in this regard.
Vaguely, yes, but because the need was so great everywhere across the organization, we dabbled in everything. We would, for example, go on a trip way out to a small town to find a kid's family, or at least next of kin, to see if we were allowed to adopt him, because he was told to go back to the streets of Uganda. And now we need to kind of take care of him, but we need the paperwork as well. Um, they would take us on little field trips here and there as well. And one day it might be that someone in the community wants to start a charcoal business and they want some kind of help with that. And for some reason, they're going to for that leg up, to begin that venture. So it all just depended on the need of the moment, which is part of the chaos. Is oh, we're doing a feeding in the slums today. So let's all go and do that, and we'll help cook and pass out the food. Um, so yeah, it just varied,
So it's
and
literally
you just
just,
had to go along for the ride.
yeah, just wherever you were needed, pretty much.
Yeah.
And did you ever feel not safe? Because it sounds pretty good when you say you lived a 5-minute walk away, then you grabbed some food along the way, walked down to the orphanage. Was
Mhm.
there any risk for you, or was it pretty safe for you to actually do that? Or were you kind of always having a guide with you or someone who is like there to make sure nothing happens?
Thankfully, we were very often with someone who we could trust. Even when we took a motorbike ride, a boda boda is what they called it, to kind of stand for border. And so you would get on the back of a boda boda with, two, three other people and just ride
Yeah.
into town. I would say the most dangerous thing was being on one of those. Uh, Riding in Uganda is a very dangerous thing, and being on the road in general is a very dangerous thing. And I actually saw a very traumatic car accident while I was there that still sticks with me. And that said, the only other time I felt really concerned for my safety was actually still on a boda boda, but we were driving through a crowd of people, and someone tried to grab the other volunteer, Sasha. They tried to grab her purse from her, and they started yanking as we were going through. Thankfully, she was able to hold on to it, and we got away safely. Um, but that can happen.
Yeah. But luckily, you guys were all good and back in
Mhm.
one piece.
And
What did
thankfully,
you?
in the town, people know that we're volunteers, and so you're more often to go, be approached by children asking for candy, because that's what some volunteers do, than you
Yeah,
are to actually feel in danger, because they know what you're doing with the community and things like that.
yeah, and they are grateful as well that you are there and helping.
Mhm.
How did how did you feel? How did it make you feel to actually see those kids there, knowing they're so less fortunate, knowing where you come from, and knowing that they are not having that life?
It was difficult. I think the other volunteer had a more difficult time with it than I did. I think when I'm in the moment, especially in these stressful situations, and I would say most of those 2 months, every day was pretty stressful. Often it did truly feel like whatever you accomplished that day was pretty desperate. And if you weren't accomplishing it, the the consequences would be dire for someone, because the need is that great. And so it could easily be very emotional, but I find sometimes I am able to kind of hold off that emotional catharsis until after the wave of stress is over. So I'm able to take a moment, and I'm able to recognize in that moment, like, oh, wow, that's really crappy. Or, oh my gosh, I'm really concerned for that kid. For example, you see a kid who's very clearly gay in the group, and you know that gay people get stoned in Uganda. There's a lot of danger for that child, and I don't know what to do about it. There's another kid who has severe mental health issues, and the solution for them is we'll just tie him up to a tree or send him to a really bad mental hospital that will tie him up to a chair. And so at some point, the level of depression becomes almost numbing. But I think that's part of the reason I wrote my book is it gave me time to really sit down and process everything that I saw and take the time to do justice to the things that I experienced or heard or was told about and start to come to terms with those things myself. So it was not just a 2 month experience for me, it was a several year process of working through the trauma of just seeing the trauma.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that because I can only imagine how tough it must be. I mean, even tougher for those kids to live that life, but also to be there and try to help, but knowing that you can never do as much as you would want to, especially for 2 months. That's never gonna be as much time as they would need. But it's still great that, there are a lot of people like you who are and were doing it. So thank you for that. It's definitely needed in this world.
It's true, but at the same time, even I now still struggle with the idea because there are certain practices at the orphanage that I don't personally necessarily agree with. It was a Christian organization, and everything that they did was enveloped in this idea of a very specific idea of Christianity that was peddled by very conservative Christians in usually the United States, in the southern United States, where I'm from. And often it's a very exclusive version of Christianity that says you must fear God, you must, uh, believe in Jesus, or else we won't help you. Um, and so they would often, give these kids new names, Moses, and other, very Christian oriented names. And because they're saving you from the streets and saving you from starving, of course, these kids are going to believe everything that they're told because this is truly being saved from the streets. Uh, but it kind of takes away their ability to think critically or to question the message. It's an everything or nothing kind of thing. And so, although you're part of this and helping save lives, there's this added layer of complexity of what are the other repercussions of these actions that I'm taking.
Yeah. What influence do you think they had on you while you were there? Because, of course, we kind of know what you did to help them, and we could talk a lot about the impact you had on them. But what impact did they have on you?
They made me reevaluate my own views on religion a lot. Um, I, at one point growing up, you're a child in the Bible Belt. And my grandfather was a Navy chaplain, as I mentioned. My parents actually both worked for the Lutheran Church. So I was pretty involved in Christianity. And seeing all of that made me really question the role and the effect of how people wield power and institutions to maintain power and maintain the institution. And I would say that was one of the main takeaways. At the same time, it taught me a whole new level of suffering that I never imagined. And I think it helped me be a lot more thoughtful in the way I consider those kinds of countries, those kinds of backgrounds. Even, for example, the role of development in how, Chinese development, for example, in Uganda, they will agree to help out these people in and build these roads and build this infrastructure in exchange for some of the best parcels of land. And so it's just a new form of colonialism that's taking place. And being able to recognize that, especially as an economics major, thinking, oh, wow, like trade is good and all these other things. And then you see how these dealings can really negatively affect these countries, but how they're in such a situation that they really have to have the infrastructure in order to grow, as well as considering Museveni, the leader of Uganda, who took it over through pretty violent means and has maintained that hold on Uganda. That influenced me as well. In the kind of like going back to my studies in Yugoslavia and the role of nationalism, I think that is more potent than ever, at least in this country where I'm growing up, is the backsliding of democracy and how people can use these strongman politics to maintain their own power.
Yeah.
So lots of different facets that influenced me by those travels, specifically in
Yeah.
Uganda.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I know that's like really personal as well. So thank you. And I also want to talk a little bit about your book because it is inspired by your time at the orphanage. And you mentioned it is about a story that you heard, and you use true facts from a true story, but then kind of put your imagination around it, how the story could have continued and ended potentially. Can you tell us a little bit about your book, what it's about, and where that idea came from without telling us too much? Because obviously, people who want to read it themselves, they don't want to get spoiled straight away. Can you give us a small summary of how it came about, what it is about?
Absolutely. So when I was there working for this orphanage, I was told a story by the CEO of and the founder of this organization. And, one of the main things that they do is they find these kids on the streets of Uganda. They then provide them with the housing, food, education needed. And usually the education is by sending them out to a boarding school. And apparently, one of these boarding schools went on a field trip to the United States. And while on that field trip, one of their kids ran off to just try and live in the United States. And I thought that was a really, really fascinating premise because these kids have a very particular background, growing up in these dire circumstances. And it provides a great contrast to a place like the United States that has its own problems and difficulties, and being able to play with those things, especially in the Trump era where immigrants are being demonized, and to see how someone who is so focused on survival would find a way to survive in a place that he would think would be the promised land, the land of opportunity, when really it's the land of limited opportunity.
Yeah. Where would people find this book if they are looking for it?
Specks of Dust can be found on Amazon, as
Right.
an ebook or as a paperback.
Perfect. I will also provide a link that I attach to this episode so that people can straight away find it if they want to. And I am very curious in reading this as well because I'm really intrigued by. I mean, we will never know what the true outcome of the story is because you said they never found this person again, right? The
Hmm.
the child ran off and that was pretty much it. We don't really know what happened after that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's pretty much what you made out of this. out of the facts that someone told you, which is very interesting. As you said, someone who comes from really poverty, had no perspectives, was kind of found and taken in and looked after in one way or the other, and then hoping for a better life and runs off, and none of us knows if he actually found what they were looking for. So I am very curious how you ended your story in the book as well, and also what adventures this child might have gone on to in your imagination. But also, I'm sure you might have put some more details of your experiences at the orphanage into it, which makes it a little bit more realistic as well. And yeah, just to learn a little bit more about those circumstances, because for a person like me who has never been to an African country and also only hears about the poverty and about life circumstances over there for kids in particular, it is very good to be reminded that, we have the opportunities to actually educate ourselves more. We don't necessarily need to go there to find this education and to read more, to learn more. And people like you who have been there, who helped out, and who actually have experienced it firsthand, to then also share a little bit of that and put it in a story. It's very interesting. So thank you so much. And I'm sure we could probably talk quite a long time about your adventures and all the other trips you've made and what impact that had on you as well, even though you have shared a little bit. But I just want to finish off this really interesting episode with the last three questions that I have for you. But I'm already very grateful that you opened up so much about your story. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for allowing me to share these experiences.
Yeah, that's like what I love about it. So many different experiences and so much we can learn from it. All
Absolutely.
right. Question number one. When you were on your trips, which you were quite often, was there a common thing that you missed from home everywhere where you went, that you thought, I really missed this particular thing, a person, a feeling, something?
I am currently spending, my year in New Zealand on a working holiday visa, and at this point in time, the thing I have missed the most is my cat. I adopted him just last year, and I got him as a kitten, and so I watched him grow up for a year, and now I've abandoned him for probably another year. So that hurts a little bit, and thankfully my parents still send me videos and pictures of him playing in boxes and trying to find rabbits in the backyard. Uh, so that's the thing I miss most right now is that cute little fella.
Yeah, thank you. It's funny how we sometimes think of the completely, like, of course, a lot of people say family, and the cat is like your family, but the small things that bring us the most joy every day, right?
Hmm. And I have a responsibility to the cat. I do have a responsibility to the rest of my family, but I am the younger child, so I don't feel it quite so bad. And thankfully, my parents are in a functioning state. So
But be careful once you're back, because I've heard that cats actually hold grudges.
yeah, yeah, I'm curious. He acted like he didn't even miss me. It hurt a little bit.
Mwah. Cute.
The dog missed me more than that.
No,
So
dogs are very loyal and
mhm.
cats very independent, but if you abandon them, then they will definitely, we say in German, show you the cold shoulder. Does not make sense in English, but it's pretty much walking away and ignoring you for a while.
Mm. We'll see what happens. I'll need to find some way to get back in his good graces.
Yes, good luck with that. All right, question number two. Which travel, sorry, which travel experience had the most or biggest impact on your life?
Hmm. We've talked about the Galapagos and we've talked about Uganda. So I'm going to say my 3 weeks in China because I did that also as a volunteer experience. I was there teaching English for 3 weeks, and it was when I was like 17, turning 18. So I was still very young, and it was the
Wow.
first trip abroad that I took without my family.
Yeah.
And the first week of the where I was supposed to be teaching was canceled because of mudslides. So I was just with this host family, and it was just completely outside of my comfort zone. I had no idea what I was doing. I had only taken 1 year of Chinese in high school at that point, and all I knew how to say was one idiom that basically meant, wow, there's a lot of people around me. And the other thing was, oh, very interesting. So I just reused those all the time. And oh my gosh, I just saw so much and I was so fascinated. I got so sick just because I wasn't used to the foods, but it also I used to be such a picky eater after that because I was too afraid to bother these hosts, these guests who were being so kind to me. They took me out to a water park, they took me out to get massages, they fed me all the time these wonderful meals. So if they're going to give me pig intestines, I'm going to eat the pig intestines. If they're going to give me duck blood, I'm going to eat the duck blood. And once you do that, well, now I can't be a picky eater anymore because
No.
you know what you can handle. So I
Yeah.
would say that was a very impactful trip.
Thank you so much. I love that you picked a new experience in a different country, and it just sounds as interesting as the rest of it.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks. All right. Last question. What advice would you give a fellow traveler in whatever direction you can think of?
Yeah. It's a great question. And it brings me back to Boy Scouts. I did a lot of Boy Scouts. My grandfather was an Eagle Scout. So was my father, brother, myself. And one of the merit badges that I earned was wilderness survival. And what they said is the most important thing to have if you are stuck in the wilderness and you don't know where you are, you must have a positive mental attitude. That is what is going to get you through 9 times out of 10. And I found that to be some of the best advice I had ever received. And so if you're ever in a place where you feel uncomfortable and you're traveling and things aren't going according to plan, make sure you have a positive mental attitude. And at the very least, tell yourself, you know what, this will make a good story in a little bit of time.
Yes, if
So,
you make it out of it, definitely true. There's like also, if you think you can do it or you can't do it, you will be right. And
mhm.
that's so much with the mental state if you are thinking positive. And if you're thinking negative, you kind of already lost. So thank you so much. What a great advice. And it's definitely an important one. So, yeah, what a great way to finish this episode. Thank you so much, Will. It was
Thank
a
you.
pleasure to have you here, and it was amazing listening to your stories. So, I hope everyone who was listening or watching could take something from it, learn something from it, even if it's just the last advice he gave, which is so good. And I hope I hear you next time. Thanks. Bye.